Chapter 2. At night in my aunt's house. "Somebody stop that child," urged some of the elders. "She's not supposed to cry like that." I ran around the house like a maniac, room to room, person to person, looking for my mother. But I could not find her. I grew more and more desperate with every search, wailing and refusing to be comforted. But she did not appear. I became more and more aggressive with my search, causing a stir, screaming and weeping in the hope that she would hear me and come to comfort me. But she was nowhere to be found. Realizing this, I cried even more hysterically until I was running out of breath and started shaking. I couldn't even speak as I was trying to grasp for air while being choked up by my tears and snot. I also could not see clearly as tears were just flowing down my face. Oh, the disappointment, the pain, the ache in my heart that I felt when I realized she was not coming. Nevertheless, I had a fighting spirit inside of me, and I continued with my search, running to the door, going outside where there was light because I was afraid of the darkness, and coming back inside, going from one bedroom to another, room to room, person to person, but she was still nowhere to be found. "I want my mother," I kept repeating. The elders tried to comfort me, but they were not hearing me, or at least that's what I thought at the time. I didn't want to be comforted. I didn't want someone to say it was going to be okay. All I wanted was my mother. I kept looking at the door, hoping to see her, or hear her sweet voice saying, "Here is Mummy, stop crying," or that someone was going to point out, "There is your mom," but no one ever did. I had to let go of all the hope that I had of her coming back to me, and it hurt. I eventually embraced my defeat. I gave up and drank the sugar water they offered me to calm down, and allowed my aunt, who was like a mother to me, to comfort me. It was around November, my birthday month. I was woken up in the middle of the night by a sea of voices. I could never go back to sleep again. Still half asleep and struggling to open my eyes, the first thing that popped into my mind was, what's going on here? Why am I hearing these voices? And whose voices are they? Am I still asleep, or am I even dreaming? I kept wondering. I then decided to sit on my bottom on the sponge that I was sleeping on as I was trying to process and make sense of what was going on. My brain then became alert and out of the fog as I realized that, nope, I'm not dreaming. Indeed, there were people in the house, which was quite weird for me because I could discern the time, and I was aware that it was quite late. I couldn't tell the time yet at the time, and my cousin and I didn't have cell phones, or even tablets or computers, but I could discern the time. My mom and dad were not staying with us full time, but they used to come regularly to check up on us, and there were times when my mom would stay behind. The plan, though, was for my cousin and me to go and stay with them. I also had uncles who didn't stay with us full time because of work. Sometimes they would come home late when we were already asleep because my aunt would sometimes make us go to bed early. In fact, my uncle, the second born out of 3, loved coming home when it was already dark. My aunt used to hate how my uncle would come home late during those wee hours. She would try, as an older sister, to make him stop doing that, but my uncle never listened. She would genuinely worry about what the men of the night or gangsters would do to my uncle if they were to find him alone on the streets that late. Auntie had a good reason for worrying, as she used to hear all sorts of stories concerning crime that would happen at night in our village, but my uncle would always say his sister likes worrying about small things. Still, having visitors at home that late was not a normal thing. What was normal for me, though, was how the villagers loved visiting one another. They would come and say they came to check up on you, and they wanted to find out how you slept. And this was quite considerate and humane of them, as they knew that my dad and uncles were staying far from us for work purposes. It was only my aunt and her 2 girls. It was also quite normal for the villagers to come early in the morning for a visit. Often, they would even come before you had woken up, and they would complain about how you woke up late. This was often done by the elders, especially when they were in desperate need of tea, and waking up early was such a normal thing for them as they were taught from their childhood that they were supposed to wake up early and complete the household chores before the sun rose. They would often say, "An early bird catches the fattest worm in Setswana." In addition to that, waking up late for them was a sign of laziness, or that you were not taught well at home. It's something that they never and would never shy away from telling you. In fact, they would make you feel so bad, and they would even make you question your morals or your character as a person. So sometimes, when they did not have any tea at home, they would come to your house for a cup or cups of tea, and they would go as far as waking you up. Tea addiction was a huge thing, not only for the elders, but also for the children, especially those who lived with their grandparents. It was quite imperative for them to have a cup before they could go on about their day. They would often complain about being unable to function well, or even cope, if they hadn't had tea yet. They drank tea so much that they would drink it in the middle of the day when the sun was blazing hot, or at night before they went to sleep. The nicest thing about this addiction of theirs is that they wouldn't have to make it themselves. They would request or tell you as a child to make it for them. Some kids found this to be a torturous thing for them. Sometimes they would be woken up or disturbed as they were watching their favorite TV shows, or even as they were studying. Every time they come, the elder would wake you up, and you would wash your face and come make tea for them. Then you would clean and make breakfast for them, or your mother or auntie or any female elder would make breakfast for them as you are busy cleaning. Depending on how long they decide to stay, sometimes they would visit for the entire day, and therefore you would also have to cater to them for the course of the day. However, having food and even tea was a privilege. A lot of people struggled, and a lot of them were in debt, not from having to pay off a car or a bond, but the debt was mostly for food. It was a common thing for the villagers to go to the local shops to take food or even alcohol on credit and then pay whenever they were able to, or whenever they were paid at work, or whenever they had received their social grants. It was also normal for visitors to borrow from other neighbors if they were in need. So, my cousin and I used to sleep on a mattress on the floor, as my aunt would sleep on a single bed alone. Both my cousin and I had our own mattresses, and we would sleep next to one another every night. Every night before we sleep, we would fetch our mattress and make the bed. This was our favorite thing to do as sisters. It was like our bonding session, as we would tell stories or listen to our aunt share stories with us, and then erupt into laughter. As I was still busy processing what was going on, I then realized that I was in my nightdress and immediately began to wonder who changed me into my nightdress. I remembered that I was sitting on a couch wearing my favorite brown jeans and jacket. Who carried me from the sitting room to the bedroom? And who changed me? I quickly answered myself. It must have been my aunt. My aunt always took care of me like her own. She often carried me from the sofa to the bedroom whenever I would pass out, and she would change me into my favorite blue nighties, which were my only nighties. I would either wear them or sleep with my panties only if it was warm. I then decided to wake up and join them in the sitting room where they were. I then realized that I recognized those faces. They were my aunts and uncles, my father's sisters and brothers. But what are they doing here? I noticed that their faces were cast down. The men were looking down, shoulders drooped as if they were people in great distress or sorrow. The women had tissues in their hands, and it was quite evident that they had been crying. As they saw me, they forced themselves to smile, and they also embraced me as they were greeting me. I also noticed that they tried to look strong as if they were scared. I would ask, "What's going on?" Or, "Why were they crying?" I also noticed that my mother was not there. My aunt told me that Mummy was going to come back. But why was everybody here except for her? The following day, the elders requested that my cousin, who is 6 years older than me, and I go to her brother's room, whom I regarded as my uncle. We were then given strict instructions by the elders to stay put and never leave the room. My cousin could discern that something was wrong. She couldn't stay put. She kept on asking them what was going on, but the elders refused to tell us. The more they refused to tell us what was going on, the more she kept on probing. Then, after some time, an elderly woman from my mother's side, who was intoxicated, came in. She was my absolute favorite, loved people, and was very lively. A free-spirited being, really. She revealed to us what was happening. The other elders were very angry with her. Maybe they were angry because of the delivery, how she gave us the news. But honestly speaking, I don't think the delivery would have made much of a difference. She told us that my mother had passed away. She was quite straightforward about it. My cousin was not only suspicious but extremely anxious prior to the news. So, the delivery of the news wouldn't have made much of a difference. Upon hearing the news, my cousin lost it. She cried in such a way I had never seen anyone cry before. She was broken and refused to be comforted. The difference between us was that she was older and wiser. She knew what death was. She fully understood that a person who has died will no longer come back. We will never see them again, and we will never make memories with them again. We were to live the rest of our lives without them, without seeing them, touching them, talking to them, laughing with them, telling them we love them, and that we would no longer hear their voices or even do things with them like cooking. She fully understood that death was final. How do we do that? How can we possibly carry on without them? My mum was more than an aunt to her. She was more of a mother to her. They were extremely close. She taught her how to cook and do other things. She was like her firstborn to her, and they shared many memories. As she was crying, I was confused at first, and of course hurt. Because hey, here's my sister weeping bitterly, and like any 7-year-old, I joined her and cried with her. But it was only when she said to me, "Did you hear that, Kafilwi? The elders say that your mum has passed away. Do you know what that means? That means she is not coming back. She is not coming back again. She is not coming back again." No matter how young the child may be, once they hear that their mother is never coming back, they lose it. No child wants to hear that their mother is not coming back again. She was explaining to me that my mother was not coming back, and that meant I was not going to see her again. And the difference again was the age. She understood death or what it meant, and I, at my age, did not comprehend death, but the one thing I knew was that I wanted my mum back. So hearing the words, "Your mum is not coming back," shattered me. Why is she not coming back? After running around room to room, looking at all the women hoping to see her and refusing to be comforted, I was given over to my aunt to comfort me, which I refused at first. The elders then decided to take me to my dad, who was standing outside. I knew my dad, and I knew his personality. He picked me up and tried to comfort me, and I remember at one point, I stopped crying, and I looked at him straight in the eyes. Our eyes locked. I will never forget that look. My father was broken, he was shattered, and I had never seen him like that before. He had no strength in him, and I could see that he was really hurting. I was not used to seeing him like that, and I had never seen him like that before. My dad was a funny man, brutally honest, extroverted, very loving, and well-loved. He had a thing with people. He could relate to both the young and the old, and he was also loved by both the young and the old. Almost everyone knew him in my village. He and my mum were quite different, though. My mum was quiet, shy, and reserved. She was not much of a talker, an introvert, and extremely strict. I was not used to seeing him like that, and I had never seen him like that before. My dad was a funny man, brutally honest, extroverted, very loving, and well-loved. He had a way with people. He could relate to both the young and the old. And he was also loved by both the young and the old. Almost everyone knew him in my village. He and my mum were quite different, though. My mum was quiet, shy, and reserved. She was not much of a talker, an introvert, and extremely strict. She was also beautiful, lovely, and warm. She was my best friend. I didn't take much notice of her looks, but much of my personality or character is that of hers. She was sick, and we would often visit her in the hospital with my dad and sister's cousin. She would go to the hospital but then come back again until she would get sick again and must go back. That day, I expected her to come back again. At least that's what I hoped for. So, the family went ahead with the funeral arrangements. There were some cultural practices that were performed prior to the day of the burial and after the burial, like the cutting of our hair, my father being told to stay in his bedroom alone, where a lot of people were not granted access to him. After the funeral, the elders came up with a date on which her clothes were given away, and we were cleansed to prevent another death, as per the elders' beliefs.